This is the Backcountry Pocket Journal. It's a small notebook journal that can fit in your pocket, your bino harness, or in your pack. This little journal is filled with practical knowledge that's going to help you in the backcountry, and it also just has blank pages that you can journal, you can put down creative inspiration, and you can tell the story of your hunt or your adventure. Okay, now we're going to dive into this pocket journal. I'm going to just take you through it page by page and show you what's included. So let's dive in. Okay, so here we have the Backcountry Pocket Journal. You can see the size of it, very portable and small. I'm just going to dive right into the pages. So when you open it up, inside cover, what you have is 2 pages for emergency contact. On this page here, you can put the nearest hospital to where you're going to be in the outdoors. You can also put in local fish and game. And then here, medical conditions notes. You're diabetic. If you need to be rescued, if you're in a situation, maybe you're non-responsive, somebody finds you, they can find this information quickly and get in touch with the people that they need to get in touch with. Next, what we have for about the next 30 pages is just blank lined paper. This is an important part because normally you either see notebooks by themselves or you see practical guide how-to books by themselves. But to have both is kind of the beauty of this Backcountry Pocket Journal. So the first 30 pages, you just have blank lined pages that you can do whatever you want with. You know, for me, a lot of the times it's to-do lists, keeping me on schedule and keeping me productive. You can also use it to jot down any creative inspiration you have, any notes, or if you just want to journal your experience in the outdoors, you can use these pages to do that. So we have 30 pages of just blank lined paper. Next, we get into our tab sections. So here on the left, we have weather tracking. You can put what the temperature is going to be, wind, what the conditions are going to be, if it's going to rain, snow, be foggy. Tracking the moon phase. I know a lot of hunters get into tracking the moon phase. You can also put that there as well. Okay, moving on this page, you have a sunrise, sunset calendar. You can put in your days or the dates. Put in when the sunrise and sunset's going to be. You want to know when the legal shooting hours are, so you can put that in as well. Okay, moving into the next section, we get into our navigation section. So for here, we have a navigation speed reference. This is a chart that you can fill in and roughly estimate how long it's going to take you to get from point A to point B. So this is modified off of the Naismith principle, which is a principle that was made by a Scottish hiker named Naismith. And he kind of came up with this formula that you can plug in your different parameters and get an idea of how long it's going to take you to hike from point A to point B. So that's basically what this is. It's slightly modified for kind of more modern backcountry hunting. I have additional inputs like pack weight, and going off trail. Distance, it says allow 1 hour for every 3 miles of horizontal distance. The next is ascent, add an hour for every 2,000 feet of elevation gain, add certain amount of minutes for off trail travel, and then add a certain amount of time for pack weight as well. Here we have route planning. So you just have your days kind of laid out and you can put your starting point and your end point. You know, starting point may be the trailhead, and end point might be a specific hill or ridge that you're getting to, and you can just put in your distance, mileage, and just have an idea of how far you're going to be traveling per day. So another route planning identical chart there. And then also sporadically throughout different sections, you will just see a blank line page that you can use for whatever you need to. Jot down some other important information or some memos, something like that. So next we get into the first aid and the SOS section. So it starts off with the backcountry first aid. It kind of just gives you some basic information and helpful tips when it comes to hydration, wound dressing, stopping bleeding, how to use a tourniquet, how to deal with a venomous snake bite, allergies, anaphylaxis, how to deal with altitude sickness, and also how to treat shock. Then we get into SOS, so signaling help, finding shelter, different ways that we can signal for help if we're lost, and then also how to find natural shelters in the environment or build shelters or a combination of the two if we need to. Again, just a lined blank page right here. Next section is fire. Just a basic kind of overall guide on different ways on how to start a fire. Here we get into the wind and thermal section. So this is going to be applicable mostly for hunters. You know, as hunters, the biggest part of the game is playing the wind. If you are a seasoned hunter, you probably already know how wind and thermals work in the mountains, but if you're not, this can be a huge help for you. Also, if you're not a hunter, maybe you're camping in bear country. Well, in that case, you probably do want to know how wind and thermals work. So for instance, if you're camping on a hillside, you probably want to hang your food downwind and also downhill, because those thermals at nighttime are going to be dropping. And you want that wind and that scent of your food to be going away from your tent. So next we get into some ID sections. So here we have some diagrams and some illustrations on animal tracks and animal scat. Obviously going to be huge for any hunter, but also anybody exploring the backcountry. You know, you don't want to set your tent up near a bunch of grizzly scat. You know, that's probably not the best spot to set up your tent. Okay, next we're getting into probably one of my favorite sections of this entire journal, and that is the essential knots. So these are 5 essential knots for the backcountry, for camping, for hunting, really anything that you're going to be doing in the backcountry. These knots can be really useful for any sort of tasks that you're going to be doing. So the 5 knots I have are the bowline knot, clove hitch, taut line hitch, trucker's hitch, and the square lashing. And in here we have beautiful illustrations that show you how to tie the knots with descriptions on how to do that. So really helpful and great illustrations, makes it really straightforward on how to learn how to do these knots and how to use them. So next we have 2 pages of rifle ballistic charts. So on these charts, you can fill out your rifle, your ammunition, the weight of your bullet, the feet per second, and then you have from 100 out to 850 yards if you want to put your drop, your bullet drop. So when we're hunting, especially out west, and we're taking longer shots, we need to know our bullet drop and how to dial on our scopes to account for that drop. So here we can do that with this chart here. We can jot that all in. There's some additional columns that we can put in for different variables. There's also wind. We can adjust for wind there as well. And then we also have a wind scope mirage. So one way we can estimate how fast the wind is moving is by the mirage in our scope. So looking at these different angles of how the mirage is blowing in the wind, we can get a rough estimate of how fast that wind is. And if you are a rifle hunter and you're like me, you probably have all of this information taped onto your rifle, or you have an app that can calculate it, and that's great. But one thing about the backcountry is redundancy is always a good thing. I was just on a hunt in Colorado, and it was torrential rain for 5 days straight. And the ballistics that I had taped on the side of my rifle, because of all the rain and sleet and snow, it actually peeled off and came off. So luckily I did have my backcountry journal I could reference, and I had everything stored in there. So again, and I have 2 charts. You know, I live in Pennsylvania, which is pretty close to sea level, and I hunt out west, which is almost up at 10,000 feet. So I have different charts for the different elevations, because the bullet is going to drop differently at those different elevations, and that's what I use that for. So there's 2 charts there for that. Next page we get into small game and fish. Here's a guide here how to clean a trout or clean a fish with great illustrations and descriptions. And then we also have descriptions as well for how to field dress a rabbit, and then some game birds as well. Come across a grouse or a pheasant or something like that. Basic description on how to breast out a grouse, pretty straightforward. And then same thing with a waterfowl, duck, something like that. And again, here we just have a blank line page. So next we get into the blood trailing section. And so I actually used this on my Utah mule deer hunt in August, and it was super helpful. So here we have a description, basic practices for when you begin blood trailing. You know, we have color descriptions of when you first spot your blood, you know, what color is it? That's going to indicate maybe where you hit it, and then maybe the best practice on how long to wait before you begin tracking that animal. You know, a color description here for the blood, and then several different steps, just kind of walking you through the best practices when blood tracking a deer. You know, for me, it was really helpful to see, because when I hit my deer, it was very dark and I could refer to this and it said liver shot. You know, here it says wait several hours before you begin that track, which we did. And then we proceeded to track that deer and we did end up recovering it. So I'm happy that I did wait. If I pursued too quick, I may have bumped that animal, may have bumped that deer and scared it even further. It may have ran miles and I never would have recovered it. So just a good reminder here on how to deal with blood trailing a deer if you don't see it go down within eyesight. Okay, and then we get to the final section, the back of this pocket journal, which is probably my favorite part of it. You know, here we have a full page where you can enter in your hunt notes. You can tell the story of your hunt, of your adventure, you know, whatever you want to include in your story, make it exciting. And then here you have your own personal harvest report, which is really cool. You can put in the species, the date, the time, the size of the animal, how many points, what the weather was, the state, weapon, your shot distance, the hunt method, whether it's tree stand or spot and stalk. And then again, down here, you can add additional notes of that hunt. And then in the center of this page here, which is pretty cool, you can print out a picture of your harvest, of your animal, and you can put it right there in the center of this page. And then this pocket journal, you don't have to throw away after your adventure. You can keep this as a memory of your hunt, of your season, of your backcountry adventure, you know, whatever it may be. And you can share it with family, you can share it with friends, you can pass it down to your kids. And I really like that aspect of this journal because it allows you to tell your story, to document that experience of your hunt or of your adventure. Okay, thanks for tuning in to this video on the Backcountry Pocket Journal. I've spent the last year designing and putting this little notebook together. It's been a lot of fun and I'm really excited to bring it to the market to you guys. I've also been using this on my hunts and on my backcountry trips, and it's been great. It's been a great companion, being able to just jot down notes, being able to refer to these different things are super helpful. And then most importantly, filling in the harvest report and using the blank pages to tell the story of my hunt. It's been great. I've already filled out kind of 2 of these and I'm creating a little collection. And it's already great to kind of look back and see, you know, all the details of my adventure. So check them out, thebackcountrypocketjournal.com. Thanks.